Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, the best place to find mental health and addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Each week, we profile a guest who shares openly about their mental health journey. They share because they understand that when people don't talk about their depression or other mental health conditions, those of us who do struggle with them can feel like we're the only ones, that there's something wrong with us and that no one understands. We understand.
I'm Terry McGuire, the creator and co-host of this podcast. You have my promise that we'll keep it real here. Depression is real, and we're not going to sugarcoat our discussions about it.
Hope is also real, and you'll get a dose of that here too. I'm Carly McCullough, a licensed social worker and educator, and Terry's daughter. We've both experienced depression and also support loved ones struggling with it. We're here to normalize talking about depression and mental health in our communities, as well as our families.
And to share real-world tested strategies that have worked for other people who have walked similar paths. Thanks for joining us. So this episode is going to be a little different because we're doing it sort of on the fly and completely unplanned and unscripted. But as we make space for people to tell their stories and their experience with depression each week, we have our own as well. And the mother-daughter, multi-generation aspect of this could allow for an interesting discussion. So we're going to find out. Carly, you up for this?
I'm up for this. I've been up for this since I had the opportunity to potentially join you as co-host here. I think that one of the things that has really moved me from the very beginning of your work with this podcast is your desire to reduce the stigma around mental health and specifically feelings of depression. And those are things that are societal, certainly. They're cultural, certainly. And, culture is also inside of families. And so I am really proud of the work that you've done for all these years. And I really...
Thanks.
Well, yeah. And I think that it's a really powerful thing. I mean, when I share with folks that I co-host a depression podcast with my mother, people go, "Oh, how's that?" It's a lot of that type of reaction. And a large part of that reaction, these people do not know my mom. It's because mental health, depression are not things we tend to talk about in our families. And one of the...
Interesting. I assumed it was because they figured I played into yours.
Well, and we know that mental health, there are both biological and cultural factors, right? It's a nature and nurture. These things are often hereditary, intergenerational, all these different things. So even if you think about the sort of the brain wiring or the chemistry that can be associated with any mental health condition, some of them are hereditary and some are not. Depression is one of those ones that can be really transmuted between generations, in large part because it's connected to intergenerational trauma, which we now have really solid evidence around. And if trauma and past harms can, through epigenetics, look it up, it's a fascinating study and field of science. If those can transmit generationally through the body, through gene coding and turning on and off, then, of course, so do coping strategies, right?
Yeah, makes sense. So another question. At what point in your life did you start to be aware of feelings and thoughts that you later learned were depression? Because you probably didn't know initially. I probably didn't know initially.
That's such an interesting question. I mean, I think the easiest places to point to are sort of the milestone lows, right? Like, oh, I knew I was struggling. I was aware that I was struggling. I can certainly point to some of those stories, and they often coincide with major life transitions. And as you've also pointed out over the years, I do think for me too, and also in our family, that there's a correlation with hormones. And so I do think that puberty and 100%. Puberty for me was probably 13. And then they say it stops in the brain at 25. So, if I'm thinking sort of like 7th grade through college graduation. And that I can certainly remember really low lows. And also so many people around me were also experiencing that it just felt like part of being a teenager in so many ways, or part of being a young adult, or part of those major life transitions.
Part of being a human.
Part of being a human. But I remember even as a kid, you'd probably remember when this started better than I did, but there would be times where you always called me Xena, warrior princess.
I did. Worrier.
Could we look at that and say, is that anxiety? Is that depression?
Probably anxiety would be my guess now, but I didn't have this, whatever. I didn't have this consciousness about it, and I didn't have the education I've gotten in the last 9 years.
Yeah, and I don't mean this in a blaming way. I just mean there were things, right? If we're looking back at what we didn't know then.
Exactly. I didn't know I had depression.
Right. I think that's all really interesting. But I remember one of the things that you created, devised, I think, to help me deal with, I think, what we can now call anxiety is
the jars with the lid. Oh my gosh.
So my mom took a pretzel jar, like a cheese ball jar. So imagine like one of those big plastic containers with a screw-on lid. And then there was a basket.
Yes.
And on the
remembered this
radiator of my bedroom, there was a basket which was open, where my mom had me write, I think, 3 things I was grateful for, and they went in the basket so that they could like go into the air.
Breathe. Yes.
Breathe. See, I remember some things. And then the jar was where I would put the worries, and then we'd screw on the lid. And it was in part a sort of bedtime ritual. I often for years and years struggled with falling asleep peacefully or being able to turn my brain off. And it's come a long way, but I think that's a sort of lifetime thing for me. And so I remember I had such a hard time thinking of the things I was grateful for. And that's one of the pieces that makes me think, oh, that more aligns with depression.
It does. It does.
Well, and I also remember you being, in some ways, understandably mad that I couldn't see all the things I had to be grateful for. You were like, you have no idea how good you have it. And I didn't. And
it doesn't have anything to do with it.
And the fact that I couldn't see it or feel it, on some level that's privilege, on some level that's all sorts of things. And on some level, it meant that tapping into abundance and gratitude wasn't something that I was having an easy time or knew how to do. And some of that could be that I was feeling depressed, or some of it that I just don't know, right? Is that like a skill thing, or is that a internal thing? And it almost reminds me of being in my high school Spanish class and realizing that everyone was talking about a prompt. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, it's written on the board. And that's when I realized I needed glasses, right? So until you understand that everyone else is seeing something differently, or your experience isn't the normal, I just always thought that as things got farther away, they got fuzzier, right? Perspective and getting fuzzy. Why wouldn't you think that if you're nearsighted?
I don't mean to laugh.
But the same thing I think can be true for
It's a great metaphor, Car. It's a great metaphor.
You wouldn't go, I wonder if I'm nearsighted, in the same way that you wouldn't wonder if you're depressed. If a lot of the people around you are depressed and anxious and we're not talking about it, then that's just the air you're swimming in. And so I don't know the real answer to your question on a timeline or on a calendar. And I think these are some of the factors that make it hard for me to know.
So what about going to a doctor? What about is it okay for me to say you've been on antidepressants?
Yeah, I've been on and off antidepressants. I've been in therapy pretty consistently since I went as a kid, but it wasn't a regular thing. But I knew that when I went to college that it was free. So I took it all through college, and I've pretty much been in therapy since, I was 18 or something like that. First of all, none of them ever told me I had depression. You are allowed to ask. I say this now knowing you can say, what do you put as a diagnosis code? And that can be a really important thing for you to know, but also a really important discussion because of how labels can either make us feel more ourselves or less ourselves, more understood or less understood.
Right. When were you aware? Okay, I'm struggling with how to ask this question. Because from my perspective, I say people in my life, including my children, didn't know I had depression until I started a depression podcast. And it's not because I hid it. It's just kind of, there were times things were so bloody depressing that I was depressed and needed to be treated both with prescription medications and therapy to navigate them, to get through them. I don't even consider that an illness. I consider that just, to use the metaphor from a recent episode with Eric about the boulder. When you're being crushed by a boulder, it's not like, oh, I have an illness. It's like, this is crushing. What is your recollection of my mental health? Or was it sort of like, oh, Mom's doing a depression podcast, I guess she has depression?
I mean, I think that as a kid, I recognized that you had boulders.
Yeah.
Hard
to miss some of them.
And I think that we were also pretty transparent about what a lot of those boulders were. I think you did certainly, you were a grown-up and going through grown-up things that I wouldn't understand what the boulder was called until later. But you can tell, when someone's under a boulder. I think that I understood that there were times when you were more elastic and times when you were more brittle. And I think that's true for any parent, to be frank, which is like, I don't think indicative of anything, but, there would be times when, this is not the sort of thing it would have been, but like if I cursed that, you'd be like, not in my house, or times that you'd be like, we don't speak like that, and you'd be like, oh, it's the same thing, but the reaction is different at different times. And so little things like that would definitely indicate like, oh, the boulder's heavy. I also think kids can notice what stories get told and what stories don't get told.
Ooh, do tell.
Well, like in family lore, there are certain stories that get told over and over and over and over again. Every holiday around the table, every time, blah, blah, blah. And then there's parts of the sort of like family autobiography that don't get told, that are sort of never addressed head on or sort of mushy or foggy. And I think that for most family, that's going to be around trauma. So often, so much attention has been paid towards things that are overt. And I think that covert is also a thing. So I think in hindsight, I can go, oh, some of the stories that weren't told were around things that involve mental health. And I think that's part of the reason you started this podcast.
Right. Get it out there.
To say there were stories, and I'm not going to let, from this point on. What year did you start this?
2017.
2017. So that 2016 was the last year in which
it was hard.
That's going to be the norm.
Yeah, right.
For our family. And that 2017 forward, there's going to be a way in which I'm not going to let mental health be a thing that we don't talk about. Not anymore.
And to be clear, from my conscious mind, and I can't attest to what was going on subconsciously or unconsciously.
It'd be weird if you could.
Oh, it'd be weird if I could. Consciously, I was never hiding it. The times I was depressed that I knew I was, I got myself into a doctor, got on meds, went to therapy, kind of worked through the way I was thinking of it then, what was an episode, and then was like, whew, Mom's back. It was just like any other time I got sick almost, it was like I have the flu and I can't do, I just can't. And this was just something else, but I didn't even identify as I'm a person with depression or I'm a depressive person. It was like sometimes this happens and sometimes other things happen.
That chronic illness thing is how I would characterize it.
Yeah.
That it was like if you had fibromyalgia or something in which you had, acute pain sometimes, so that sometimes we might have made plans, or it might be Thanksgiving, but we're going to watch a movie in bed,
Which we literally did. We had turkey sandwiches in my bed, son on one side, my daughter on the other. As adults, you were straight up adults.
Yeah.
And we binged on a Netflix series, and you both have described that as one of the best Thanksgivings we've ever had. And I had done like the Martha Stewart thing in the past. I had worked so hard to make some holidays really special. And that one I was like, I don't have a drop. I just kept falling asleep while you watched it and waking back up because I wanted to be with you, but I didn't have the energy to be with you. How do you remember that?
Yeah, about the same. And I think when I would visit home, that one was that one happened to fall on a holiday. But I think when I came home to visit from college, people would be like, so what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to, and I would be like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. We might just sit on a couch, and that doesn't mean anything's wrong either. There's nothing wrong with that. It might be we just really want to catch up, but
but most likely a low energy time.
For sure. But when you grow up with someone who has what you would later understand as a chronic condition, like in so many ways, my grown-up brain, it just makes so much sense that it would just be like, yeah, we didn't know what it was, but we knew that like capacity varied.
It's a very gracious way to say it, Car.
And I didn't know that everybody else's didn't or doesn't.
Or doesn't.
And how much we hide it, right? It's like the masking piece. I think one of the things that when I think about that Thanksgiving is like, we just let all pretense go. And it wasn't for anybody else. It was for us, where we were, and we had a nice time. And it wasn't, there was no supposed to be. It just was. And there was nothing wrong with it.
And it almost seemed like you guys needed snuggly mom time as much as I needed, please don't ask anything of me time.
Well, that, and we're reciprocal organisms, right? If it's like, if you're in bed, if we're your kids, even if we're in our 20s, like the move is to snuggle, right? Not be like, I'm going to be out partying with my friends, like there was care, and you didn't need us to be bringing you hot water bottles or medication, but like proximity, you wanted us near, you liked that we were home. And so to be physically close and with you during that time, that's the type of thing that as a kid, you figure out how to do. Mom might need more hugs today is like the type of thought you might have. So those are things that I think you just start to understand as a kid of someone who's going through something. And I think whether that thing is a medical condition or a diagnostic blah, 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 or just a life transition thing. Like we're going through this right now, and today it feels really hard. And I wonder if it would have been different if you hadn't also modeled for us or create an expectation for us that we could have mental health days.
Let's talk about that, because I learned that from our next door neighbor who gave her daughter mental health days when she needed them. And I remember thinking, how is this not a thing that everybody knows and does? I would keep you home if you were sick. And there were times you were so stressed out. I mean, you were both excellent students, and that carries a weight. And I remember saying, like, please don't take advantage of it. Don't do it like every test or quiz or anything. But neither one of you did. But I remember you coming down, both of you, and saying, I need a mental health day. Or you'd be so anxious the night before that I'd say, hey, why don't just take tomorrow off? I forgot about that, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I think there's a way in which, because that was a grace that you extended us and a normalizing thing that you extended in our direction, I wonder if it made it easier for us to extend it in the other.
It's a nice thought. Belated things.
Because if the message we'd gotten was grin and bear it, then you being in bed on Thanksgiving, there would have been a maybe like grin and bear it. Like, it's Thanksgiving, Martha, like tough. And I think there's a lot of people who grin and bear it on Thanksgiving. So I just wonder if there's a way that there was an understanding of varying capacity, of rest or needing a break or needing a change in the pattern or tempo of life as being a strategic and intentional thing to do rather than a sign of weakness or trying to get out of a quiz, right? If it had any of that energy to it, I don't think we would have used them at all. But there was just like, I don't know what it means, but today I can't.
Right.
So it's not like a thing I would have used to describe you. I also think, and you've talked about this so many times, is that when people think of depression, they think it only looks like Eeyore.
Right. I was so high functioning.
Well, there's high functioning and there's also like hilarious, And so like humor is like one of the core values in our family. Like we play games when we're together. It's a lot of word games. It's not necessarily like silly TikTok video type games. But there's a
not.
lot of laughter.
Right.
And there always has been. And so a lot of the things that would look like depression as it was explained in the 90s and aughts, and for so much of, I think still today, it's like, if you can grin and bear it, or you're pretty good 6 out of 7 days of the week, then we consider you to be like good to go. And I think that that's one thing that our society like really is like, can you work or can you not work? Is it a sick day, or are you good enough to not take a sick day? It's a real binary existence around health and wellness, and health and wellness do not exist in binaries. Yeah, I think that there are many ways in which we are not the only folks for whom your diagnoses look quite clear, or things you've been struggling with look very clear in the rearview mirror based on how we understand and talk about them now, versus how they were understood in the past. In the past, someone with depression did not look like you looked in my childhood. And the fact remains that someone with depression looks like exactly what you looked like in my childhood.
Truth. We'll wrap up here, but is there anything you want to ask me about depression, mental health, whether it's mine or yours? Or
yeah, I think that some of the mental health that you were clearest about was Grandpa's.
Bipolar disorder, undiagnosed and untreated.
That there was this sort of caution that you made very clear that like we as kids needed to be cautious, and your hypervigilance around him while he was around and before Alzheimer's was really noteworthy because it was in such stark contrast to so many of the other things. It was like, this is like a root. Like you just seemed on high alert when we were around.
Yeah, there were times he was a great person to bounce you on his knee and read you a story. And there were times, when I would know that his mood was such that I would not want my children around him any more than I wanted to be around him when I was the child. Yep. Or to have you do what I did, which is think if something's wrong with him, that you have to do something to cheer him up or make him better. Or, if he's perhaps in a manic state, that you have to do anything at all with that either.
Yeah. Sort of maybe other than Grandpa, when I in general think about our family lineage and your family of origin and things like that, way more than thinking about any particular diagnosis, I think about trauma.
I do too.
And I think that it is also why I advocate so strongly for trauma savvy and trauma invested training in workplaces and schools, is because it can be very easy to go, little Terry's depressed and has depression, and so we need to navigate Terry's depression. And yes, that is a piece of how to support you in this. But if we don't zoom out and go, what is it? What are the things that are causing us to be unwell? Then it's just going to keep happening. If we just keep localizing, Terry's brain chemistry is altered such that she struggles to whatever, like if we just locate it as individual pathologies, then we are just missing the big picture of this stuff. I think that it would be short-sighted and insincere when you started this podcast to break the stigma around mental health, for us to not name trauma and see it as the sort of epicenter around which everything else forms a constellation.
Yeah, when your mother has a high ACEs, adverse childhood experiences score, it's going to manifest physically.
For sure. And so I do, in some ways, attribute some of my hypervigilance, because the world in so many ways has just been safe for me. Not just, but overwhelmingly safe for me. And the messages and hormones that your body gave mine speak otherwise.
Yes. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
I mean, what are you going to do? But I do think that that's a real thing. So in this conversation of us talking about my mental health, your mental health, our broader familial mental health, and also the role that trauma plays, I have to read this quote by Resmaa Menakem, who is a fellow social worker and a brilliant human being. He wrote that trauma in a person, decontextualized over time, can look like personality. Right? If we decontextualize what's making Terry sad, it can look like Terry is sad. Not that I think you even look sad, but I'm just using you as an example. Then the next line is,
I can be heavy and dark. I can be. I know that's it.
And my husband calls me people's sad friend. So, I mean, I think I can too.
Okay.
The next line is, trauma in a family, decontextualized over time, can look like family traits.
Oh, wow.
So the so-and-sos, you know them.
Right.
Or in schools, I hear this about it, but have you met the mother? So we know where that comes from, right? But again, that trauma has been decontextualized. We're no longer curious about what made the behavior a coping strategy, because so much of it is. It's how we survived the trauma. But when it's decontextualized, it starts to just be like the crazy so-and-sos. And that's really both harmful and incorrect. It is incorrect information. It's false. And then the last is that trauma in a people, decontextualized over time, can look like culture.
Oh.
And there's 1,000 examples I could give for this. But that when we decontextualize trauma, both at the individual, familial, and societal level, we're missing the thing.
We are missing it.
It is a folly. We are being intentionally misdirected away from the things that are making us sick, that have made us sick. And therefore we're mad at ourselves, or we're sad, or we'll feel hopeless. And those feel like, in many ways, survival strategies that are strategic, rather than maybe some of the anger that we might feel about the things that are hurting us, where we might be able to join together in some of that righteous anger and go, hey, stop it.
Right.
Knock it off. That's not okay. This isn't okay. Everyone I know is hurting.
That was interesting. I was actually nervous to ask you the questions because, I have something to do with your upbringing. I had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And, I will accept responsibility for any and everything that is mine to accept responsibility for, but it doesn't mean it's fun. And I was a little nervous that you'd be like, well, so thanks for not throwing me under the bus. Yeah. Thanks. Love you.
I love you too. We really hope that this discussion helps give some language or context to your own depression, or ideas for how to support someone else in your life living with it. We invite you to check out the hundreds of episodes in our archive and to explore both the Resource Hub and treatment options on recovery.com. Depression is too dark a road to walk alone.
We'll be back next week.